Hello. Today I will be bringing you one of the new lower tier DDs, which is the Podvoisky. This is of course the new tier 5 DD. The Gnevny is being bumped up to the T6. It's being recalled Gordy, and that's going to be, well, the T6 Gnevny basically. And this Podvoisky is the new tier 5. So considering the Gnevny is being buffed up, this one is obviously going to be a bit weaker. But it is actually quite interesting in itself. Well, first of all, first thing you might notice is the speed. You see I'm doing 45 knots. That's because while the Gnevny did 38 knots and had a nice turning circle of 610, this one handles more like the high tier Soviet DDs, meaning it does a blazing 42 knots, which is 4 knots faster than the Gnevny, but on the other hand it has a 700 meter turning circle. So you get a taste of how the higher tier Soviet DDs will handle right at T5 already. And I don't really mind this. I mean, yes, you gain speed, but you lose a lot of, you lose maneuverability, so it's a fairly good trade. And it gives you a heads up of what you're about to face in the future. Reload wise, you might see that the reload is actually pretty insane. Very long reload, in fact. I think the default reload is 9.5 seconds. But on the other hand, the Gnevny of course had a 5-second reload, so that's a pretty huge nerf compared to the Gnevny. But on the other hand, you have 5 guns, whereas the Gnevny had 4. And you have much faster turret traverse. Both guns have 8% fire, so you get better handling guns and one more of them. I will get into the guns later because they have a very special gimmick. Now the guns are quite meaty, very good in fact. Just like the Gnevny, you are able to punish cruisers extremely hard with AP if they give you a broadside. So having this full volley of 5 AP of shots can deal a ton of damage. The torps are identical, 4 km range, 14.4k damage, 65 knots, exactly identical to the Gnevny. They're pretty much YOLO torps. You use them when you go in for knife fights or YOLO rushes. AA on both this and the Gnevny are pretty much identical. I think the Gnevny has slightly better AA, but they're both pretty much garbage, so it's not really worth arguing about. Concealment wise, this ship, well, it's faster, so it kind of goes to say it also has worse concealment. In fact, the Gnevny can get 7 km concealment base, or the Gnevny has 7 km concealment base. This one has 7.5, so that's another nerf, a 500 meter concealment nerf to this new T5. Another thing worth mentioning is of course the HP. 12.7, Gnevny has 13.9k. So as you can see, many things are being toned down on this ship, like this new T5. In many ways it is weaker than the Gnevny. And what else do we have that was worth mentioning? Oh, well, actually we got a good example here of the AP. Now the AP is, as I said, very strong on the ship. Just like most Soviet, I tend to call it Stalinium because it's sometimes hilariously strong, but especially against cruisers, same tier, even tier 6, tier 7, depending on a cruiser, you can punish them extremely heavily with this AP. This Emerald makes the mistake of angling against everyone else but giving me broadside, so that means I can of course start landing citadels on him and punish him very, very hard for this. Oh, and of course gun range, while we're talking about it. I'm running AFT. So that's why my gun range is, I think, 11 point something, but that's actually significantly worse than the Gnevny. Without AFT, your gun range is only 9.5, whereas the Gnevny had 11.9. So that's probably one of the biggest nerfs, a massive reduction in gun range, meaning you really need AFT, otherwise you won't be really firing long range at much of anything. However, of course, well, the guns are powerful, the torps are great, and this new speed though lets you do a lot of YOLO stuff. You might see here I'm popping speed boost. I'm gonna try to kill this Emerald and then torp the Dunkirk. And the Dunkirk really doesn't have too much time to react because this ship is insanely fast. You can see I'm doing 45 knots. I'm closing in extremely quickly. He shot his first volley, and these torps are of course very fast, quite hard to dodge. And the Dunkirk isn't exactly known for his torpedo belt. He makes the mistake of turning away instead of turning into the torps. Turning away, of course, makes it all easier to land torps as always. So my prediction is pretty much on point here, and I managed to land all 6 out of 6 torps. And that pretty much crushes the Dunkirk in one shot. Yes, I would get things like Devastating Strike, but of course this is a test account, we don't get any achievements on these things, so things like High Caliber, Confederate, Devastating Strike. Hell, even if we detonate, we don't get detonation flags, which is a bit annoying. But the guns, of course, well, this, you can do this in a Gnevny as well. You could do this ages ago with HE, you can Citadel Bogues or other low tier carriers, because, well, they're so thinly armored that you can punish them. So overall, I've been mentioning a lot of the negatives, basically, a lot of the nerfs on how the ship is being basically down-tiered. But I still like the ship, and the reason I actually like this ship is the turrets. Much like what they did with the Königsberg a while ago, where they made all turrets 360 degrees, they have done the same thing to this ship. So not only do you have significantly fast turret traverse than the Gnevny had, you also are able to turn all guns 360 degrees. And this is quite important. In fact, if you look at the way my turrets are facing in the bottom left, while I'm telling my team to stop sailing into the enemy base, this is pretty common. You're looking at my team position, we have a bunch of them sailing into the enemy base and a bunch of them sitting on 10 lines, so of course not exactly optimal, trying to like herd these sheep into the correct target, which is of course B in this case. Anyway, these turrets, of course, you see all my turrets, all 5, if you check bottom left, all 5 turrets are pointing left. And let me see if I can move my crosshair around here so you can get an example. And you see, you can turn them all the right-hand way around. In fact, first of all, you got great firing angles. You got extremely tight, narrow firing angles, especially when you're sailing towards someone. In fact, closing the distance with an enemy DD is very easy because, well, the speed is the fastest at T5. Nothing even comes close to the speed. I mean, you pop speed boost and speed flags and you're doing 45 knots. No DD has any chance of running away from that. Hell, you can YOLO pretty much anything and they can't run away because of that speed. But this turret traverse especially makes it very easy for you to weave between torps and dodge incoming shells, while at the same time being able to keep your guns on the target, which is what I consider the strength. Like I'm pointing my guns to the left here. Oh, actually the Mutsuki went for... I'm expecting the Mutsuki, but it looks like he went for the other side. Well, that's a bit unfortunate. I was hoping the Mutsuki would pop up at this gap here, but it looks like the Mutsuki has snuck around all the way around to A, and he's now capping A instead. But I need to secure this cap because I think we're gonna lose our Zuyo, and we might lose both those battleships down there, and this game, which I thought was in the bag, is actually turning quite hard now, since my team has some interesting ideas of positioning as usual. Here's a tip, if you're uncertain of where you should position in a game, go start moving towards the one cap we don't have. In this case, B. Moving towards B. And once we capture B, start moving towards C. It's a very simple concept, but for some reason it seems very, very hard for the average player to understand that in domination, the only thing you need to focus on is controlling the capture points. You don't need to sail around in our spawn, you don't need to sail around in the enemy spawn, you don't need to sail around in capture points we already have. You need to either, if you have 2 capture points, we can defend them, meaning we defend the one that's closest to the enemy. Or if we have 1 capture point, then we move to the capture points that most likely is going to be B in this case. But here I can show off the turrets while I'm sailing towards here. You see how the guns are able to shift all the way to the right and then all the way to the left without having to wait for them to turn 360 or turn around the back way. So it's very, very easy to quickly basically weave in and out, or well, you can weave left and right and dodge incoming shells. You see it moving all my turrets from the right all the way to the left, and it doesn't take many seconds. So this, of course, even though you have an extremely short or extremely long, reload, you are able to gunfight against enemy DDs extremely effectively, because if you use this well, you are quite a hard target to hit. Not only because of your slim profile, but also because while they have to give a lot of broadside to bring all their 5 guns to bear, you do not. And, well, you can just make moves you usually wouldn't be able to do in any other DD. So this, basically, the ship received a ton of nerfs in multiple different ways. It loses HP, it loses gun range, it loses concealment, well, it loses reload. But in return it gains these 360 degrees turrets, and honestly I think it's probably a fairly even trade, because you can make up so much ground or so much lost basically potential with these turrets, because you no longer have to always turn to one direction. And of course, unlike the Gnevny, which has pretty awkward turret firing arcs and very slow turret traverse, you are much more maneuverable. You are able to push in a knife fight much more effectively. So while the Gnevny, if we had a straight up fight where this guy and the Gnevny were sailing side to side, the Gnevny's DPM would overpower this one quite easily, especially with the HP bonus it has. In an actual fight, I don't think it would be as straightforward, mostly because of the moves and dodges and things you can pull off with the Podvoisky, which are pretty much impossible to do in the Gnevny. Like, you see this extremely narrow angle that I'm holding towards this Fubuki. He tried to shoot me, but he couldn't hit me. Of course, adding in, we have this of course synergizes extremely well with the incredible speed of this ship. I mean, this Fubuki made a mistake of engaging me, and how is he gonna outrun? It's impossible for anyone to outrun this ship. There's no DD at tier 5, even tier 6, that is able to outrun this DD. It's blazingly fast, and with its turret configuration, it's probably one of the best DDs in the game for hunting down an enemy DD. Because, well, good luck trying to outrun this with all 5 guns being able to point at you while he's closing the distance. It's murderously strong at this. So I actually quite understand and support all the nerfs they did to this ship, like all these different nerfs in HP concealment and so forth, because if they kept the same stats as the Gnevny had, but gave them this speed and this turret traverse and this turret placement and this 360 degrees, then the ship would be completely overpowered. As it is right now, though, I think it's actually in a pretty good place. With the lack of concealment, you can avoid it as an enemy DD. I mean, you can just avoid engaging it, which is what you do with things like Khabarovsk and all the higher tier DDs. So I feel like they have struck a pretty good balance with this ship. If you get broadside like a potato, like this Kirov is doing, yes, it can punish you with AP. Well, not Citadels there. But overall, this ship feels very balanced to me, and I think the design is also quite good. It's a bit different than the usual stuff with the 360 degrees turrets, but unlike, for example, some ships which as of late have been quite ridiculous, like for example the Grossovoy with the insane AA or the Black with the insane radar, I think this one actually strikes a pretty good balance. For example, in close range, I'm pretty sure a Nicholas, for example, would crush this, because Nicholas DPM is so good, and well, Nicholas has better concealment, so basically Nicholas can just set up for the fight. Hell, Nicholas can probably launch torps, considering how fast this is. If you keep rushing a Nicholas and he preemptively launches torps, you're gonna sail into them. Once again, 700 meter turning circle on the T5 DD is massive. I do predict that a lot of new players who aren't used to the way high tier Soviet DDs play might actually struggle a fair amount with this in the beginning, especially, but the ship is very fun. It's very fun, and I think it's quite balanced. It's very rewarding as well. And unlike of course at higher tiers where there's a lot of railguns that can easily hit you, this one is extremely tricky to hit if you're going full speed. You gotta consider this ship is moving at almost Khabarovsk speeds, but unlike at tier 10 where we have Zaos and Hindenburgs and Moskvas and all these railgun cruisers that can absolutely nail and demolish you, there's not really any real railguns at tier 5. Even at tier 6, the closest we have is the Budyonny that has railguns, or maybe the Molotov. But besides that, most enemies will have issues hitting it because of its insane speed. So once again, loss of HP, gain of speed, loss of concealment, that's speed and so forth, and it's a good balance. I actually like this ship. It's a bit harder to play, I would say, than the old Gnevny, but in some ways it's more fun and less frustrating because, well, the Gnevny had 36-second turret traverse, meaning you absolutely had to have expert marksman, and even on top of expert marksman, using the turret traverse module might even be recommended because they were so slow, and you have no such issues with this one. I don't even use expert marksman on this one. You can get away with not using it. So they're quite a fun DD ultimately. It looks like the enemy team, we are going to win this. The enemy Bayern is fleeing. Of course, fire chance 8%. Here you are not nearly as good at burning down battleships as the Gnevny was, because of course Gnevny has same fire chance, one less gun, but significantly faster reload, so the DPM of course adds in and makes the Gnevny better at burning down battleships. So you're going to be worse at this. Of course you're better than the Gnevny at YOLOing in and getting your torps on it, as you saw against the Dunkirk. But the balance they've struck, I like it. I actually like it. This is one of the new Soviet DDs that I'm actually been enjoying a fair amount. The other one that I've really been enjoying is the Yerevan, which is of course the Kiev. For those that don't know, the Kiev used to be one of my favorite DDs. And then they nerfed the HP on it because, well, it was pretty OP at tier 7. But ever since they nerfed the HP, the Kiev has felt very weak and kind of anemic. You got 12.8k HP against a bunch of overpowered ships like the Belfast and such, and it's pretty unfun to play. But they have rebalanced the Kiev to tier 8, so that's probably going to be the next ship I will cover, because the new Kiev is so much fun, and I've been having so much fun playing it. And straight up from the first game, it felt like the old Kiev, but they rebalanced it to T8, so it wouldn't be as overpowered at T7. So once again, I considered it a fairly good choice, so that will probably be the next ship that I cover. So there's been some hit and miss when it comes to this, but then again, these are all works in progress. They are all subject to change. There's been a lot of hit and miss when it comes to these new ships, but Podvoisky actually gets my recommendation. I think it's a good balance between fun to play and balanced ship overall. The game ends 131k damage. Most of it probably came from YOLOing Dunkirk. It was tier 5 to tier 6 matchmaking, which is pretty common. Tier 5 these days you rarely get 5 to 4 matchmaking at all. 16-minute game. Most damage came from AP and the torpedoes, pretty much as expected. Anyway, I can quickly show you my recommended build, even though it's ages before these things are going to be released. Right, moving right along. You want to get the range first, because as I said, the range is really bad, so you need to get it to 9.5 at least, which is still bad, but it's better than terrible. Second of all, you of course want the hull upgrade for the HP bonus, because once again, your HP is already nerfed, you need whatever you can get. Now it looks like this torpedo upgrade is just as weak as the Gnevny's. Usually when it doesn't show what bonus stats it gives, it also gives additional flooding. And the pretty basic propulsion and such, and faster turret traverse, pretty common on DDs. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm not even running Expert Marksman on this ship because I really don't need it. You can actually get away with it, whereas on the Gnevny it was pretty much must-have. Much like on the Gremiashi and such, you had very slow turret traverse. As you can see, I'm running AFT and Concealment Expert. This is a 14-point captain. Pretty standard build, to be honest. And you might not have a captain this high tier, so it's up to you. Do you want AFT or do you want Concealment as the first pick? It kind of depends on your playstyle. But of course, speed flag 44.1 knots, which makes this ship very fast. And overall, I think, well, as you can see, speed difference only 1 knot slower than the Khabarovsk. So this ship is blazingly fast for tier 5, which is probably one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much, because I really like fast ships. Anyway, that was my Podvoisky preview, I guess. I'll talk to you guys later.